Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey show here on GB News. The Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, Wes Streeting, will join me. I'll be asking him about Labour's plan to send top doctors into areas with high joblessness to get the economy moving. And as the economy unexpectedly shrank in January, should Rachel Reeves resign if we go into recession? Shadow Education Secretary Laura Trott will be here. I'll be asking her about the Conservatives' plan to force votes on Labour's Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill. Former Defence Minister and retired British Army officer Colonel Richard Kemp and Tobias Ellwood would join me to discuss Sir Keir Starmer's coalition of the willing for Ukraine. Is it enough? And what do they make out of the suggestion of peacekeeping forces being stationed in Ukraine? As part of our series on small and medium-sized businesses, hairdressers Toby Dicker and Kerry Larcher will be with me in the studio to discuss the impact of Rachel Reeves' budget, which it's set to have on salons up and down Britain's high streets. And former Police and Crime Commissioner of Cleveland, Steve Turner, will be here to share how his life and career were turned upside down by false allegations. We've got 90 minutes of punchy British politics to come, so do not even think of going anywhere. But first, as ever, joining me to review the Sunday papers is GB News presenter and former Defence Secretary Michael Portillo. Before your 11 o'clock show, you are working hard this morning, Michael, and it's delightful to see you.
Good morning, Camilla.
Let's kick off with Tory matters, or at least right-wing matters. Front page of the Sunday Times, Tim Shipman's got this piece suggesting that Nigel Farage has been meeting with, drumroll, Dominic Cummings, of all people. What's this about?
He certainly has met Dominic Cummings. Whether they've been meeting, that is repeatedly, I think is more in doubt. I think you're more excited by this story than I am. My interpretation is that Farage and Reform UK have had a lousy 10 days, and some of the pressure has been taken off the Tories. The Tories, in the last 10 days, have thought, oh, maybe Farage is going to fold and crash and tumble. So I think this is a little bit of a spin, a little bit of a story put there to frighten the Tories. What frightens the Tories? Dominic Cummings frightens the Tories because he's been so destructive to them in the past. So I think this story of a meeting that I think took place some time ago, which I don't think was particularly lengthy, I think is a little bit of a spin. And, of course, if it takes some attention away from the terrible row...
How damaging?
I think amazingly damaging, the row with Reform UK. I mean, speaking personally, it's transformed my view of Reform UK. You know, a lot of people 10 days ago were talking about it seriously as, you know, potentially the next government.
Yes.
But I think a party that can't handle 5 MPs, you know,
but then
a
week is a long time in politics. If, for instance, Reform do outperform the Tories, which is expected at the local elections, and they win that Runcorn by-election, then he recovers it, doesn't he, Farage?
Well, they'll be in a better position. I think these very big questions about Farage are firmly now in the public mind, or they're certainly in the metropolitan mind. I think what's happening at the moment is, you know, people around Westminster think that Farage has, you know, really had a rough time, a bad time. Maybe the voters out there at the moment are less conscious of it. So the question is, will this trickle out from the metropolis?
I mean, I'll be asking Shadow Education Secretary Laura Trott, who's very close to Kemi Badenoch, whether the Tory leader is doing a good enough job. What do you think?
My own judgment is she's very good and very promising, but, you know, what you hear Tories talking about all the time is whether she needs to be replaced. So my view, it doesn't matter at all. I mean, clearly there are a lot of people who are not happy with her at the moment. She's got to, She's got to pick up the game, I think.
Yeah, and be better at PMQs, I think.
And really, the one piece of good news she had recently was the terrible situation within Reform UK, which is why, I go back to saying it again, why I think that story's appeared today.
Right, it's been placed, perhaps.
Placed.
Now, there aren't only splits in the Tory party, or indeed on the right, also on the left, because now we read on the front of The Observer that Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall may be forced to water down her welfare cuts because it is angering people on the left of the Labour Party.
Well, not surprisingly. I mean, this is difficult territory for Labour. But to put it in some sort of context, as I understand it, the payments that are made to people for health reasons of working age have gone up £20 billion a year.
Which is staggering,
since
isn't it?
COVID.
Yeah.
And they're due to go up by another 18 billion in the next 5 years. So we're talking about 38 billion there. The Labour government was talking about cutting between 5 or 6 billion, therefore a very small proportion of that enormous rise. I don't think anybody argues that this rise is what they wanted to see, or that this rise was necessary, or that this rise has anything to do with the deterioration in health of the people. All of this is unintended. It's money that not even the government wants to spend. But the government can only think about saving 5 or 6 billion out of 38 billion.
Yeah, it's a drop in the ocean.
And now they're U-turning on that.
It's odd, isn't it? But then this is always going to be the case, isn't it? As Keir Starmer does his best impersonation of a red Tory, you're going to have the socialists in his midst complaining about cuts to anything.
And these benefits are so badly designed and now so badly administered that it is genuinely difficult to get rid of what appears to be excess from amongst people who have real needs and are very deserving. So, for example, one of the things they were talking about was freezing these personal payments, which are paid to people.
PIP, which stands for Personal Independence Payment. They're meant for people who are very, very unwell and can't work. But yet we read...
These are paid to people in work and people out of work, which means, for example, you can't make the argument that this is about driving people back into work because some of the people cannot work. Some of the people cannot work.
Yes,
and therefore, if you cut their benefit, you're not driving them into work.
They're for people with cancer and things like that.
And so this is a very, very blunt instrument. And of course, you're going to hurt some people who are very deserving, and they're going to be harrowing cases. So I'm not sure that they've designed their cuts very well anyway. But the news today is that the government is in retreat on what it was going to do
So
anyway.
they were going to cut the inflation-linked rise to PIP. They're now backing away from that. But here's the confusion, particularly about that payment, and it's the general story for benefits. You have people who have cancer who can't work, who have to claim PIP to just stay afloat, for instance. You have some people claiming PIP because they can work, they just need support to work. Then you have people, according to the Sunday Telegraph, who are claiming PIP for ADHD, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder.
£500 million's worth on that.
How on earth can somebody suffering from ADHD be claiming the same benefit as somebody with cancer? Well, this it doesn't make any sense, Michael.
This appears to be very poorly administered. And another little figure from today is that a fifth of car sales in Britain, are Motability.
Yes.
That is to say, the vehicles that are provided to people with disabilities. And these include top-range BMWs.
Yes, 52 grand BMWs. I'm going to be asking Wes Streeting about this because an investigation carried out by one of my Telegraph colleagues, Sam Ashworth-Hayes, found that it's easier to get one of these cars for autism than it is asbestosis. Think about that and think about what this original scheme was designed for and how it's now actually being abused, I think. Let's move on to foreign affairs, not least with your former Defence Secretary hat on. PM puts pressure on Putin. What do you make of the coalition of the willing?
Well, I think that headline is a joke, don't you? Can you imagine?
Well, is he putting pressure? Is anyone putting pressure on Putin right now? No one.
The Kremlin at the moment trembling because of what Sir Keir Starmer is thinking. Now, I just want to call out, and I think that is the expression, this coalition of the willing. I mean, Keir Starmer has had a marvellous press recently. People say he's doing brilliantly in foreign affairs. I think this coalition of the willing is a complete fantasy. And it's getting to the stage where it's really risking being quite dishonest. Why do I say so? Because within the nations of Europe, basically, we don't have the capacity to do this. We don't have the capacity to send forces in who could make a serious difference. It is a fantasy to believe that the Americans are going to provide a backup, air support and so on. They've made it clear again and again. They're not in the business of guaranteeing Ukraine. there are 1 million Ukrainians under arms, and I think, we on the side talking about possibly sending 10,000 troops between 29 nations is kind of insulting. It's a way of getting a good press for European leaders, but it's not serious. And the most convincing part of it all, I think, is, can you imagine that Putin has really been at war for 12 years, however you calibrate it, in order that at the end of it, troops from NATO countries should be in place in Ukraine?
Yes.
He's absolutely
He's going to accept effectively a de facto NATO army on Ukrainian soil that he believes to be his.
He is certainly not going to do that. And Trump will not force him to do it. I mean, not that Trump can force him.
How do you think Trump has played this?
I think he's the worst deal maker in the world.
Really? The art of the deal?
He fancies himself. I mean, what is more dangerous?
Explain that, though, Michael.
Well,
why?
If you wanted to get a deal, you would have said to the Russians, there are lots of things the Biden administration didn't give to Ukraine, and we're willing to give them. We're willing to give them planes, we're willing to give them long-range missiles, we're willing to take away the bans on using some of these weapons inside Russia. That's how you put pressure on Russia. Then you say to Russia, are you willing to come to the negotiating table? What did Trump actually do? He cut off the communications to the Ukrainians. He stopped the flow of arms. He said that the Ukrainians were more difficult to deal with than the Russians. As the Ukrainians began to lose on the battlefield in those days and hours when they had all those communications cut off, the Russians became more self-confident. It looks now as if they're going to take Kursk. Trump doesn't seem to have any answer to Putin's filibuster, because Putin said, this talk about...
Well, Putin's got all the time in the world. I mean, he's been in power since 1999.
It's all terribly interesting. Let's discuss it for a long while.
Yeah.
And Trump is just not laying down the law with Putin at all. So I think it's been a wretched negotiation. Very interesting, actually. The reports coming out of Ukraine is that the Ukrainians don't take this seriously at all. They just think one way or another they're going to be fighting this war forever and a day.
Forever and a day. Michael Portello, we're going to leave it there because we hear that the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is preparing for our interview as we speak. Thank you very much. You'll be back at 11 with your own show. Thank you. Well, coming up next, as I say, we're going to be speaking to the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, Wes Streeting. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest winter sun forecast. After the recent warmth across the Eastern Med, it is cooling down here, but still plenty of fine weather for parts of Turkey, Cyprus and the Greek islands. A little bit more unsettled for the rest of Greece and Italy, but especially so for Iberia, some very heavy rain coming here during the first part of the week. But after some recent unsettled weather for the Canaries, it is warming up here. Plenty of fine weather to come with highs in Tenerife, 23 degrees.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. Joining me now is the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, Wes Streeting. Lovely to see you this morning, Mr. Streeting. Thank you for your time. I see you're announcing today that you're going to be sending doctors in to fast-track appointments for people who are economically inactive. This is an attempt, I would imagine, to get them back into work. But then if you're working and paying taxes, aren't you going to be feeling a bit aggrieved by this policy? Surely you should be prioritising cutting waiting lists for people who might have problems with their health or might be waiting for operations, but they're actually holding down jobs.
Yeah, it's not quite that. Set up. What we are doing is sending these teams, these further faster teams, into the 20 hospitals that are in areas with the highest waiting lists, in areas with the highest numbers of people who are off work, off sick, and that's with a focus for getting people not just back to health but back to work. We've got 3 million people in this country at the moment who are out of work because of long-term sickness. 1 in 10 are off work, off sick. We're outliers as far as other advanced economies, and we've got to deal with that because the country is paying a high economic price. And where we've sent these teams in, which is all part of the wider drive I've got to take the best of the NHS, the rest of the NHS taking the best practice to some of the areas that have struggled more, we're actually cutting waiting lists twice as fast as in other areas. So I will be applying this principle elsewhere in the NHS to make sure that where we are seeing people doing something that's innovative and impactful, they're not just isolated pilots. The NHS has got more pilots than the RAF, but they're being adopted and rolled out across the country, and that's part of the wider reform agenda we've got to take the NHS from the worst crisis in its history, get it back on its feet and make sure it's fit for the future.
We'll get into further questions about the NHS in just a moment, but just on benefits, obviously there is talk, and you've talked about it in quite robust terms, about cutting that welfare bill. We now read on the front pages of the Sunday Times and the Observer that your colleague Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary, is backing off from some of these welfare cuts, presumably because there are some socialists in the party that object to it. Why, for instance, should anyone be getting a PIP, a personal independence payment, for ADHD?
Well, there are definitely issues in the welfare system that need reform, and Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary, will be setting those reform proposals out in the coming days. We do. But
she's already watering them down.
There are 1,000 people every. Well, look, to be honest, Camilla, I've read a lot of the reports and speculation in recent days, some of which is quite divorced from the reality of what the government is considering.
What, in the Observer?
We do need to bring the welfare bill down. We've got 1,000 people signing on to personal independence payments every single day. That's not sustainable, and we want to make sure that people who need the most help get the most help. and that other people who are able to work are helped back to work. So the welfare state isn't just a safety net for those who need it, but it's actually a springboard back to work, because we've got 1 in 8 young people in this country at the moment who aren't in work. That's not a sustainable position. Our employment levels, unlike other leading economies, haven't returned to pre-pandemic levels, and that's not sustainable. So our whole focus, whether Labour, whether Party of Work, is getting people back to work.
All right. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Should you be getting a PIP payment for ADHD, yes or no?
I think it very much depends on the nature of the condition and the severity.
ADHD, a
These things are a
PIP
spectrum,
payment.
so I think it very much depends. We are looking at this whole issue of eligibility, and we are looking at this whole issue of overdiagnosis. Because I am concerned that we have overdiagnosis of these conditions.
All right, the jury's out on PIP payments. Should you be getting a 52 grand BMW from the Motability scheme if you've got ADHD? Why on earth do you need a taxpayer-funded car with ADHD?
I think that's a very good challenge, and one of the reasons why we are looking at the whole issue of welfare reform. I look at the welfare system, and I talk a lot to Liz Kendall, the Work and Pensions Secretary, and I feel like her challenges and my challenges in the NHS are very similar, in that unless we reform the system, 2 things will happen. One is that it won't be sustainable in the longer term financially, and secondly, it won't command the support of the public politically as well, because, you know, people agree that we need a national health service free at the point of use, but they are intolerant of the waste, the inefficiency and the bureaucracy they can see. And that's not just patients, by the way. People working in the NHS experience it and are frustrated by it. And similarly in the welfare system, we've got to make sure it's reformed so it is sustainable. So we're looking at all of those issues, and Liz Kendall will be publishing her plans in the coming days.
Let's look at you axing NHS England. What's going to happen to those 9,500 staff?
I'm glad you raised this, because I think this is absolutely the right thing to do. But I am mindful of the fact that there are lots of people whose jobs will be impacted, and there's no sugarcoating that. It's not their fault they're working in a bureaucracy that's grown beyond a reasonable size, and a system that is full of waste and duplication and inefficiency. We're tackling all of those issues, and in terms of job losses, we will obviously treat people fairly, with respect, but there will be job losses in order to achieve hundreds of millions of pounds worth of savings.
How many jobs need to go?
Services. Well,
we've got 40,000 NHS managers. We've got 40,000 NHS managers who are all earning more than the average nursing salary. How many of those 40,000 have to go? How many of these NHS England staff, 9,500, have to go? Because the audience would like to hear numbers on this. I asked Pat McFadden last week, how many civil servants are you getting rid of? Couldn't give me a figure. It therefore it lacks credibility to say that you're cutting down when you won't give us figures.
So the combined size of my department and NHS England is about 19,000 people. That's double what the equivalent was in 2010, when Labour was delivering the shortest waiting times and the highest patient satisfaction in history. We want to halve those numbers. So that is a significant reduction. There are people's jobs and livelihoods affected. I am sorry about that, because I know what that fear and anxiety that it creates. But we've got to achieve those savings that we can put into frontline NHS services, and also deal with the layer and layer and layer of bureaucracy that we see in the NHS, which isn't the fault of the people who are doing the jobs they've been asked to do, but is the fault of my predecessors, and we're fixing that and sorting it out.
Although only this month there's a role advertised in the southwest of England for an NHS diversity, equity and inclusion manager on, wait for it, 122 grand. Why are they still advertising for these roles? Can the NHS, with a waiting list still at 6.3 million, afford to be spending 122 grand on a DEI role? What's going on?
Yeah, so there's 2 things I'd say. One is Jim Mackey and I are slamming the brakes on overspending in the NHS and making sure that we are reducing the numbers
so you're
of
going to
staff
pull that
who are
advert?
not delivering frontline services. But secondly, just to say, on diversity, equality and inclusion roles, some of them have really lost their way. I mean, I saw a report just this weekend suggesting that we should change the name of midwives to, I can't even remember the name of the role that was being proposed. It was so absurd.
Mid-people.
I find that really frustrating, to be honest, because we've got black women 3 or 4 times more likely to die in childbirth.
OK, but that's great.
Black men twice as likely to die of prostate cancer.
OK, but Mr Streeting, why are these roles still being...
got to deal with, and that's
why are
what
they
we'll
still
do.
being advertised? Why are they still being advertised? If you're cutting down on them, why are they still on websites?
Yep, well, I think it is fair to say it has taken a little while for some people in the NHS to get the message. I think the announcements in recent days will have sent a very strong and clear message.
OK.
But I want to make sure that every penny of taxpayers' money is being well spent. But I would say on this issue of diversity, equality and inclusion, some of that work is really important and valuable in terms of, poorer people more likely to die than richer people, men dying earlier than women, and real differences of the experience of black women in childbirth than white women, for example, in terms of black women being far more likely to die. I think everyone would agree those are issues we should tackle, and that's where a focus on equalities can make a real difference. But what we see too much of, and you guys have covered this quite extensively, are some well-meaning but totally misguided approaches, and that's what we'll be putting a stop to.
Back to the abolition of NHS England. I think so far since Labour have taken office, you have got rid of 2 quangos, but you've set up a new one for every 2 weeks that you've been in power. So we've now got 27 new quangos, along with countless reviews. So it's all smoke and mirrors, this, isn't it, Mr Streeting?
Well, people will judge us on the results at the next election, and what you've heard from the Prime Minister this week is his palpable frustration with the inefficiency of the state and its incapability of delivering what people want, and frankly the fact that it looks and feels so outdated, so slow, so cumbersome. That's not a reflection on the civil servants who work in it necessarily. It is a reflection of the system, which looks far too much like...
Why then create more arm's-length bodies?
Sometimes the 19th century. Well, sometimes there is a role. So, for example, one of the arm's-length bodies in my department, the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, set up by New Labour when we were last in government, has done a brilliant job of driving down the price of medicines and strong-arming powerful big pharma to give us a good deal on price and to get patients access to latest medicines. So that's an example of how sometimes those reforms and those bodies can be impactful. But are there too many? Absolutely, and that's why we're trying to reduce the number.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning, Wes Streeting. Thank you. Lots more still to come on the Camilla Tominey Show today. Shadow Education Secretary Laura Chott will be joining me. I'll also be speaking to 2 hairdressers that say they've been absolutely kiboshed by Rachel Reeves's budget. That's part of our look at small and medium-sized businesses. And I'm going to be speaking to a man who claims to have been a victim of a witch hunt orchestrated by the Labour MP Andy MacDonald. Don't go anywhere because there's a lot more still to come. Stay tuned. Be back in just a moment.
You could be the next big winner of the Great British Giveaway, as we have an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash to be won. Cash that you'll be able to spend on anything you like. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also give you the latest Mulberry handbag, and not 1, but 2 sought-after designer watches, so you can style it out this spring. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB12 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 4th of April. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
I believe you've had the pleasure, or is indeed the pain,
of sitting through some of this Netflix documentary. What can we expect other than this, frankly, vomit-inducing glimpse into her royal lifestyle?
Well, it was this morning that I watched it, and it's certainly not going to be in watershed hours. There's no juicy bits. But of course, this is Meghan's problem moving forward, is that without the juicy bits, I don't know if many people are going to watch because they want to hear about the royal family and her links to it. So that is the problem. And of course, before she joined the royals, this was her bread and butter, her lifestyle blog, The Tig. And that did well because no one knew her as part of the royal family then, so everyone turned to her for that. But of course, now she's joined the royal family, she's not known for her lifestyle brand, she's known as Meghan Markle, who joined the royal family.
Pandora, there's been, how should we put it, a degree of criticism around the fact that Meghan Markle has said that she wants to give lifestyle advice for hard-working mothers. She's a pampered princess. She hasn't really worked today since she was in Suits.
I have to say, when she was making these comments in the show, I was thinking, this is not going to go down well. I don't know who advised her to say, oh, you know, working people can definitely come back after a long day. But let's say you're a nurse working in a hospital. After a big, long hospital shift, the last thing you're doing is doing bedtime blooms for your guests. If you're lucky enough to have a guest bedroom in your flat or in your house. I mean, it does sort of beg the question, who is advising Meghan to say this? But I suppose if it's Gwyneth Paltrow, she can definitely say it, and she's done lifestyle shows, so why are we giving a different rule to Meghan?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News. Lots more still to come on the show today. Shadow Education Secretary Laura Trott will be joining me. I'll also be getting her reaction, as well as to the education policies that have been tabled by Labour, Kemi Badenoch's policy of renewal for the Conservative Party. I'll also be reflecting on Sir Keir Starmer's coalition of the willing for Ukraine, with former Defence Minister Tobias Ellwood and retired British Army Colonel Richard Kemp. Plus, as part of our series on small and medium-sized businesses, I'm going to be speaking to two hairdressers about how Rachel Reeves's budget will impact them, and former Crime and Police Commissioner of Cleveland, Steve Turner, will be here to share how his career and reputation were turned upside down by false allegations. But first, here's your news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Camilla, thank you. Good morning. It's just gone 10 o'clock. These are your headlines. The Health Secretary has warned that hundreds of official bodies are cluttering up the health system as he prepares to axe more health quangos. Writing for the Telegraph newspaper, Wes Streeting also revealed the abolition of NHS England is the beginning, not the end, of his plans to slim down the bloated public services. Mr Streeting announced last week that NHS England, the world's largest quango, would be scrapped, with the health service brought back under control of ministers. Elsewhere in the Labour Party, ministers are reportedly considering abandoning plans to freeze some disability benefits, including personal independence payments. Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall is said to be watering down her radical cuts to the welfare budget after a backlash from MPs and ministers. Reforms to the welfare system are expected to be announced this week, ahead of the spring statement on the 26th of March. In other news, US President Donald Trump has launched a wave of strikes against the Houthis in Yemen. In a post on his Truth Social platform last night, Mr. Trump said that the attacks are in response to Israeli ships being targeted in the Red Sea. He also warned Iran the country's support for the group must end immediately. The Houthi-run health ministry said at least 31 people were killed and 101 others were injured in the strikes. Now, at least 51 people are reported to have died in a fire at a nightclub in North Macedonia. The blaze broke out while a local pop band was performing at around 2:35 a.m. this morning in the town of Kokani. The country's interior minister told a news conference the fire started after fireworks were set off inside the venue. 100 people are also thought to have been injured and are now in hospital. Authorities in the US have confirmed at least 34 people have died, including 12 in Missouri alone, after deadly tornadoes tore through southern states, flipping cars and flattening homes. Around 138 million people are still at risk of severe weather, with tornado warnings in place across parts of Illinois, Mississippi and Kentucky. Meanwhile, more than 250,000 properties were without power across 7 states, including Michigan, Missouri and Illinois. That's according to Tracker Power Outage. And NASA astronauts stranded in space are one step closer to home after a long-awaited rocket with a replacement crew finally arrived to take over. The SpaceX Crew 10 mission docked around 29 hours after it had been launched from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. US astronauts Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams were due to be on the ISS for only 8 days, but because of technical issues, they've been stranded there for almost 9 months. The astronauts are due to begin their journey back to Earth later this week. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia. Lots more still to come today. I'm going to be reflecting on Keir Starmer's coalition of the willing for Ukraine with Tobias Ellwood and Colonel Richard Kemp. I'm also going to be speaking to 2 hairdressers to hear what Rachel Reeves's budget is doing to their salon and indeed those up and down the country. Plus, the former Police and Crime Commissioner of Cleveland, Steve Turner, will be here to share how his career and reputation were turned upside down by false allegations. But before all that, Shadow Education Secretary Laura Chott joins me now. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely to see you this morning. Can I have your reaction to the... Thank you. Can I have your reaction to Sir Hamid Patel being made the new chairman of Ofsted? Just for the uninitiated, Sir Hamid used to be the head teacher of an Islamic school in Blackburn, a girls' school. While in that role, the school became one of the first in the country to urge pupils to wear a hijab outside of school. Apparently, guidance told the pupils there to recite the Quran at least once a week, not bring stationery into school that contains un-Islamic images. And the school was criticised in 2010 after a Saudi Arabian cleric visited who had described Jews as pigs and prayed to God to terminate the Jews. Is this the right appointment for Ofsted?
Well, look, Camilla, with this individual, I know that he has done some good work as the head of an academy trust. But as for the specifics about what was said, I'm not clear on exactly what was said in front of children or not. I think this needs to be looked into and then we can form more of a view.
I think in general, though, what do you think about somebody who's associated with an Islamic school? So this is a bit of a departure because it's somebody associated with a religious school taking this key role at Ofsted. That's not something that's ever happened before, as far as I'm aware.
I don't have a problem with, I believe in faith schools. I think faith schools play an important part within our system. So I don't have a problem with that per se. But as I say, these individual allegations need to be looked at and taken seriously.
OK. I see that you visited the Michaela Community School in December. Catherine Birbalsingh is the head teacher there. She's known as Britain's strictest headmistress, and indeed we've spoken to her in the studio. She has described the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, as a Marxist. Do you agree with that analysis?
Well, I certainly agree that the policies that she's espousing are just definitely more Jeremy Corbyn than they are Tony Blair. I mean, Catherine Birbalsingh has been amazing on this education bill, a bill that is going through the House of Commons that is the policy equivalent of a wrecking ball. It destroys the cross-party consensus we've had on what improves education over a number of decades, a consensus which has led to English children being the best in the world, in the Western world, at reading and maths. It is absolutely wrong. There is no evidence whatsoever that what is in this schools bill about academies will improve a single school. In fact, it's going to make it worse, and that's why I want them to take these academy clauses out of the bill.
And how successful do you think you're going to be in your quest to amend that bill? Because obviously Labour have got a huge majority. They don't seem to be moving on this, and Bridget Phillipson does seem to be supported by the civil servants in the Department for Education. So what difference can the Conservatives really make to this legislation?
Well, we've already had some success. When the bill was introduced, I pointed out that the bill, as it was drafted, capped the pay of teachers in academies. The government denied this, but it was later proven that it was true and they've had to amend the bill. We've already had a success. We're going to continue to make the argument about this, and this is not just us saying it. It's the Children's Commissioner who says that the bill will lead to children spending more time in feigning schools. It's backbench Labour MPs. It's also head teachers and heads of academy trusts across the country. This is not just us. It's a coalition of people who are telling the government they need to think again.
There's some news in the papers this morning, I think it was either the Sunday Times or the Sunday Telegraph, suggesting that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is now going to employ 4 barristers to prepare the government for legal challenges against its rise in VAT on private school fees. What's your reaction to that revelation?
Well, look, the rise in VAT on school fees will do nothing except damage state school education in this country. We already know that the numbers leaving private school are above the estimates that were given by the government. That means that it's going to cost the government more money than it's going to save. It's going to mean more pressure on our state school system, more pressure on our SEND system, and that is why it is the wrong thing to do.
But then again, the Conservatives can't do anything about it. It seems that Bridget Phillipson is on this path. She's not deviating from it. I appreciate that you're providing some opposition, but it just shows how powerless the opposition actually is to stop some of these measures. What do you think is motivating both of these different policies?
Well, like I said, we've had some success already, and I have not given up, Camilla, and I will not give up because this is so damaging as a set of policies, so I will continue to fight it. But in terms of what motivates it, it must be ideology because, as I said, the evidence is all against this. So it's just kowtowing up to unions. That is the only thing that can explain it because it is bad for children and for parents up and down the country.
Are you familiar with the Lost Boys report that was produced by the Centre for Social Justice a couple of weeks ago, which revealed that particularly working-class white boys were falling well behind girls in school, in higher education, and even in earnings when it comes to the 18 to 24-year-old age category? What do you think can be done about it? And is fatherlessness to blame in some cases?
It's a brilliant report. It's also some work that actually MPs were doing before the election. People like Jonathan Gullis were taking up prior to the election. It's a very important issue. And this is the sort of thing that government should be looking at the moment, rather than taking a wrecking ball to our schools. And it is exactly these people who the changes that we're talking about in this schools bill will damage the most, because it's people from disadvantaged backgrounds who will bear the brunt of falling standards in our schools in this country, which is what is going to happen if this disastrous, discredited schools bill becomes law.
Just moving on to the Tories, isn't it now becoming the case that Keir Starmer is doing everything that the Conservatives promised to do but failed to deliver? We've got him now getting rid of NHS England, which is something a former health minister, Lord Bethell, has now wished that you did on your watch. We've got him slashing winter fuel, maintaining the 2-child benefit cap, cutting international aid, cutting the civil service, as I say, axing NHS bureaucracy, possibly now slashing benefits. These were all things that the Tories should have done. And now he's stealing your colours. He's parked his tanks firmly on the Conservative lawn, hasn't he?
Well, Camilla, I'll tell you what this government is doing. They're cutting pensioners' winter fuel benefits. They are implementing a jobs tax, which is going to lead to redundancies up and down the country, and it's going to mean, for example, childcare costs going up by over 10% for people at home. And they are destroying our education system. And those are the things that we as Conservatives are fighting so hard in government. We are reduced in number, but the scrutiny that we hold is the thing that is going to hold back this government from doing even more damage to our country.
Well, you are scrutinising the government, but nobody's really listening, are there? Is there a problem with Kemi Badenoch's leadership? Lots of talk now in the papers, Farage having met with Dominic Cummings to discuss whether Kemi Badenoch should be pushed out. Lots of talk about Robert Jenrick, would he have been a better leader? She hasn't made a clear enough mark in her first 130 days in office, has she?
Well, Kemi took over after a historic defeat for our party, but she is bringing the change that we need to win back the trust of the electorate and to speak the truth about what happened beforehand. Sorry, my hair's all over the place in the wind.
That's OK, you look fine.
To speak the truth about what happened to speak the truth about the mistakes that were made in the past, because rebuilding trust is the thing that we really need to do. And Reform Party are in chaos at the moment. The Lib Dems are doing nothing but enabling this Labour government. So it's up to us and our reduced number, because of reform at the last election, enabling this Labour supermajority, to provide the scrutiny that we can do. And we are doing that, and we are fighting incredibly hard.
Are you? I mean, you're on the broadcast round. You speak to the media a lot. People like Chris Philp speak to the media. Robert Jenrick does. Priti Patel. But you've got other members of the shadow cabinet that people have not heard of. Where's Andrew Bowie? Where's Stuart Andrew? Where's Gareth Bacon on transport? Where are all of these people? Edward Argar on health. I haven't had any challenge from the Tories on NHS waiting lists. You're not being an effective opposition. Nobody's hearing you.
Well, I hope people are hearing me on education, Camilla. That's what I'm doing. As I said, we've got change already. We've got change on a number of other things as well across government. We are reducing number. In opposition, you have to fight so much harder to get yourself heard. And you are calling out some fantastic work by my colleagues, by Chris in the Home Office, by Robert Jenrick, who's calling out the two-tier justice system that is being imposed in this country. And that is what we are doing for people sitting at home right now, because we know that this government is damaging. We know that this government are doing dreadful things for people up and down the country that they did not vote for, and so and we have to earn back that trust. So it is right that I'm on shows like yours, making the argument, talking about what we're doing, speaking about how Labour are doing things wrong and what our alternative is, and we will continue to do that and continue to fight, because that's our job. That's what the British people have told us to do, and we will work at it as hard as we can.
But if you have a disastrous result in the local elections in May and you lose the Runcorn by-election and Reform win it and you come third, will Kemi Badenoch have to consider her position, Laura Trott?
No, I mean, these local elections are from a high point, like they were after the vaccine bounce. You've got to Runcorn, we're not going to win the Runcorn by-election. There's no way. So this is just ridiculous for people to be talking about that. And also, I think that it is just such a distraction from opposing this government. All I want to do right now is to make sure that we get the government to think again about their disastrous jobs tax, which is going to cause people up and down the country to not have the employment opportunities that they deserve. It's going to mean that childcare costs are going up for people at home who are really struggling at the moment. It's like completely unacceptable that they're causing pensioners to really struggle on another cold day like today with their heating. Those are the things I want to focus on, that I think we should be focusing on, and that we will focus on. We will not be distracted.
OK, Laura Trott, thank you very much indeed for braving windy conditions up there in London. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you. Well, coming up next, we're going to be reflecting on Keir Starmer's coalition of the willing for Ukraine with former Defence Minister Tobias Ellwood and retired British Army officer Colonel Richard Kemp. Former Defence Secretary Michael Portillo has said it's a fantasy. I wonder what they think. Stay tuned for that.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here with an exclusive opportunity just for you, our incredible GB News viewers. We're giving you the opportunity to win a VIP studio tour right here at GB News HQ. Plus, you'll also get to meet yours truly. It's easy to enter, just head to gbnews.com/community competition and follow the easy steps. Don't miss out, enter now, and I'll see you soon at GB News.
Full T's and C's apply. It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Joining me now is former Defence Minister Tobias Ellwood and retired British Army officer Colonel Richard Kemp. Chaps, I was thinking in the break I should have changed into fatigues for this, to be speaking to two former soldiers at the same time. I don't know if you managed to catch Michael Portillo going through the papers with me earlier, but the former Defence Secretary described the coalition of the willing as just a fantasy. What's your reaction to that, Colonel Kemp, first of all?
Well, I tend to agree with Michael Portillo. I think that, first of all, the peacekeeping force deployed into Ukraine depends upon the consent of both sides, and that includes President Putin. And Putin has made it clear already that he's not willing to accept NATO forces, whatever flag they might be operating under, whether it's EU, some separate organisation, or NATO itself. He won't accept it, and if they deploy, he will attack them. So I think that, unless he changes his mind, of course, that's off the table from that perspective. Starmer has also said that, that they can't deploy without a backstop from the United States. The United States has said they won't give such a backstop. So again, unless Trump changes his mind, it's off the table. And finally, I don't think the British have said they're going to take the lead in this. I don't think the British have the force levels to provide any really effective role in terms of troops on the ground. Maybe a maximum of 5,000 at the most, I would suspect, which is pretty minuscule when you consider the length of the front line that's got to be patrolled. So my view is it is not very likely to happen. I think it's being put forward by Starmer and by President Macron as a means of showing President Trump that Europe's prepared to do the heavy lifting, knowing that they won't actually have to do any heavy lifting.
Yeah. Tobias, is it all talk and no trousers?
I think we need to look at the bigger picture here and see where our world is going. And there will be conflict in Europe unless we make the right decisions now. And we cannot talk in this form of appeasement. We need to come to terms with the fact that we have a very different kind of American president that is abandoning the norms of international statecraft, is abandoning any sense of duty to uphold international standards, let alone lead the West. And Trump is redefining relationships with both friend and foe as he pursues ruthless economic nationalism, protectionist agendas. This is not the America that usually we stand shoulder to shoulder with. And where Trump is taking America, actually, I would say, is very un-American, deliberately inciting tariff wars with allies, and at the same time increasingly aligning interests with Russia, Europe's enemy. So we have to quickly adapt and adjust to this new normal. We cannot rely for the moment on America, and we must ensure that no deal with Putin is agreed that looks like appeasement. Otherwise, a wider conflict in Europe is inevitable if we don't stop there. So we need to make sure that we support Ukraine, that we handle a resurgent Russia, and we make sure that NATO is fit for purpose. So I'm actually pleased to see Britain stepping forward. Of course, there are many questions, but we are finally spending more on defense. We are forming a coalition of the willing, and we're determined to stand with Ukraine. And that's what this meeting of senior military leaders in London will be all about.
All right, but I mean, I appreciate you've never been a massive fan of Donald Trump. Surely there needs to be a concession from both of you that we wouldn't be talking about a ceasefire if he hadn't been re-elected as US president. I mean, we had a huge amount of foot dragging. Biden didn't do anything about this, did he? He just wanted the war to continue. There was no intervention by the US, no intervention by Europe. On it would have gone.
Well, it's not as simple as that. And actually, I wanted Trump, I wished him well at the very, very start. But I've just articulated where Trump is taking America and how dangerous it is. He's dialing back from Europe as Russia dials up. Putin right now, as one of the key stakeholders, is enforcing, making sure that there are no NATO forces involved in any peacekeeping plan. And Trump is actually articulating this, parroting those very same words. Ukraine knows that it can't trust Putin and wants support from the West, from Europe, and that's why we're rightly stepping forward. So to simply say that, oh, it's good that we're all getting around the table, Trump simply wants any peace deal, not caring of the details. And that is dangerous because, as I say, that all this will do is give space for Putin to rearm, regroup, and go much, much further than Ukraine. He doesn't see Ukraine as a country. He sees Ukraine as a domain for which belongs to Russia, and he will advance further from there. That is the bigger picture that we need to get our heads around.
Colonel Kemp, what do you think? I mean, we've now got Putin sort of filibustering. He's in no rush at all to try and resolve this. There is a strong argument that's been made there by Tobias Ellwood that actually all Trump has done is strengthen Putin's hand. What do you think?
No, I agree with Tobias that that Putin is a very big danger, not just now, but for the future as well. And we have to take steps, and the whole of the Western world has to take steps to try and stop that happening. But I disagree that, and I think we need, we here in the UK and in the West, we need to calm down on Trump. I think we need to separate Trump's position regarding NATO from Trump's position regarding Ukraine, which are separate things, but of course they're linked. And what Trump's trying to do over Ukraine, whether we like it or don't like it, what Trump's trying to do over Ukraine is to bring about an end to the war. And during the Biden period of presidency, both Biden himself, the US, and the European countries failed to deliver enough assistance to Ukraine to enable them to win the war. They gave enough to allow Ukraine to defend itself, but not enough to allow Ukraine to push the Russians back, which may have been possible with significantly more military assistance from the West. The fact is that Biden and the European leaders were scared of Putin. They were scared of his saber rattling, of his nuclear threats, etc., and that deterred them. That they were self-deterred by Putin's action. But I do think that we may or may not like the way that Trump is carrying out this negotiation, but it is a negotiation on his part to end the war, which I think at this point, Europe and the US having let Ukraine down badly, I think is an essential thing to do. On the other hand, I think, I don't think we should totally assume that Trump is going to get out of NATO or turn against NATO. I think quite the opposite. But we have to look at this, I think, very much as two very separate issues. And the first one to be resolved is the war in Ukraine, which really, I mean, there's a great deal of killing going on now, which really probably should be brought to an end, given that Ukraine has no chance, in my view, of actually pushing Russia out now. Russia is on the offensive. Russia is taking more and more Ukrainian territory every day, and that does need to be stopped in some way.
Tobias Ellwood?
Well, I agree with Colonel Kemp. And the Ukraine war is a massive example of risk averseness. Every time we had another bit of kit that we were going to slide across the table to Ukraine, we had a massive public debate about it. I think I discussed this on your program many times indeed. We were too risk averse. And had we had the same sense of determination, grit and tenacity to support Ukraine as we do today, if that was there a couple of years ago, we wouldn't have been spooked by the nuclear talk that Colonel Kemp rightly mentions. But we are where we are today. And I just stress the bigger picture here, that America, we cannot rely on America. I'd love to think we can. I'm half American myself. But at the moment, we are seeing Donald Trump pull away, symbolically, certainly metaphorically, from Europe. And therefore, we have to pick up those pieces. And I do worry where this may go, because Russia will take full advantage of the fact that he's now got an American president actually batting for him. So this war in Ukraine is a war in Europe. And if we don't put this fire out, this war will simply get bigger. And that is the big headache that we, as Britons and indeed as Europeans, need to come to terms with. How do we actually square this circle? Do we sign up to Putin and Trump's deal, hoping that it may or may work, bearing in mind that Trump wants nothing to do with supporting any deal? He's ruled out any use of American forces. So he's leaving us to our own devices. And that's why we do need to step up. And I'm pleased that we're doing so.
Colonel Kemp, just a final word from you. I mean, how do you, as a military man, I'm thinking of you thinking strategically and tactically, how do we push Putin away from this position of just dithering and delaying simply because he can? He's been in power since 1999 in one capacity or other. He's in no rush to settle this. Why would he be? There's no political motivation for him to. He's not got a 4-year term. He could be in power forever.
Well, I think Russia does have an interest in ending the war, albeit maybe on a temporary basis. They've got a rather terrible economic situation now, which is not going to go on forever. The economy is not going to keep running forever. It's going to come up against the buffers before too much longer. And I think that means that what Putin wants to do, I believe, is to probably end the conflict on his terms, with the maximum possible gains for him. And then lick his wounds and rebuild his forces, rebuild his economy so that he can start again. And he will have other targets in Europe. He will want to go back to the attack on Ukraine. He'll want to attack Moldova, I have no doubt, and also Georgia and Romania. So I think the likelihood is he is going to go back on the offensive, but he will, in the meantime, I think, succumb to Trump's moves to try and bring about a ceasefire. I don't know if it's going to be in the next days, weeks or months, but I think it will happen.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, Tobias Ellwood and Colonel Richard Kemp, for joining me this morning. Well, coming up next, as part of our series on small and medium-sized businesses and the effect of the budget, I'm going to be speaking to 2 hairdressers to understand how salons on our high streets will be impacted. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Trans police officers will be allowed to strip search women despite ongoing backlash from critics. New guidance for the National Police Chiefs Council says that biologically male staff who identify as women should be allowed to intimately search women as long as they possess a gender recognition certificate. Now, what could possibly go wrong? But some women's rights groups claim that the police had forgotten about women in their pursuit of gender ideology. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joined by the Surrey Police and Crime Commissioner, Lisa Townsend. Lisa, a delight to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much for joining us. A lot of people have very, very legitimate concerns that if you're a woman, you're in a vulnerable position, you're being searched intimately, it should be another woman who is searching you. And a trans woman, in a lot of people's eyes, isn't a woman. They're a biological man who says they're a woman. What's your take on this?
I'm afraid that this is just the latest in a long line of announcements like this from the NCC about the ability for trans police officers to search women, males essentially, to search women. We wouldn't think it was okay anywhere else, and it's not okay in policing. I think there's also another way of looking at this, which is it's not just male officers, and they are born male. We are talking about males being able to search women. It's also the other way round. It's also female officers potentially being told that they have to search a trans woman, i.e. a male who has been brought into custody. That male could have been brought into custody because he himself has been violent, and he is insisting that he is a woman and therefore, there's no time to check the gender recognition certificate, but that's how he identifies, and he insists on a female officer searching him. So I think we have to look at this on both sides, and either way, it can't be right.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News. Joining me now is the co-founder of the British Hair Consortium, Toby Dicker, and the owner of the Vanilla Room Salon in Hornchurch, Kerry Larcher. And we're talking to you both because when we launched our kind of campaign from small and medium-sized businesses to react to the budget, I sort of did the shout-out and said, if you run your own business and you've been positively impacted by the budget, please do get in touch. We were then inundated by lots of people who have been very negatively affected, and a lot of people were working in the hair industry. So I thought we'd have you on and let's talk through some of the issues. So first of all, what has been the impact of Rachel Reeves's announcements last autumn on your sector? Toby?
I think the impact has been massive, and I think most people don't really realise now what that's going to be. The thing is about hairdressing and beauty is anything that increases labour costs or labour taxes hits our industry 5 times harder, because we have 5 times as many people working in the industry to add for each pound that goes through the till. So we're disproportionately affected by anything that increases costs.
So we've got the hike in employers' national insurance that you're contending with. You're contending with the increase to the minimum wage. You'd obviously employ quite a few people on minimum wage, but then that affects the differentials of people higher up in the salon. Kerry, just talk to me about life since COVID and how hard it's been to run a salon.
Well, obviously, with restrictions past COVID was very difficult initially. Everybody wanted to visit their hairdressing salon and there was a high demand, but the teams had to take lots of precautions and protect themselves, and that took wear on the industry. And then from there, the businesses, whilst we had that initial peak, the businesses since have actually took a little bit more of a steadier pace since then. We have still got our increased costs of bounce back loans, etc. Post that, and then the budget has obviously added to a big problem for us.
Have you been able to put a figure on how much the budget is going to be costing you from April?
Yes, I have. For my salon, it's an independent salon, but it's going to be costing me over £1,000 a week.
And how are you going to afford that?
We're not.
So what does that mean in practice, letting people go?
So in practice, it means that our apprentices will be the biggest sector suffering, because they have a fixed-term contract, and when that's up and we renew for the new apprentices, they will be getting less working hours to the minimum of 30 hours a week, which is what you need to be to an apprenticeship, or we won't be taking them on. Not just myself.
There's a stunning statistic. There's a number of different reports. One has been carried out by the National Hair and Beauty Federation. It's called Straightening Out the Costs. I love that use of a hairdressing term. And it's basically suggesting that the amount of people now wanting to get into hairdressing, so young people, has decreased dramatically. There were 16,000 people back in 2015, now just 6,000.
That's true, yeah. 16,000 people. The biggest reason for that is not that people don't want to come into hairdressing, it's simply affordability. Where Kerry's talking about 2 different salons on the high street, what's very different about our industry is that you can have 2 salons next door to one another, one that runs the self-employment model, legitimate according to HMRC, and one that employs, but one pays 2.25 times more tax. And the government have to recognise that levelling of the playing field, or that disproportionate, is going to kill employment. There are going to be 97% people self-employed, 3% left in employment by the end of this Parliament. There are going to be no apprentices in 2 years' time, because we simply can't afford it. And if you don't sit down with us and understand, if Treasury stop putting out trite remarks like we've reduced rates across the term, they haven't reduced rates, they've increased rates by 2.4 times. When I paid £10,000 in rates last year, I'm going to pay £24,000 the next year. That directly affects employees.
Indeed. So how do you cope with that doubling, more than doubling of cost?
The only way to cope is to put prices up. But in many areas, there are so few businesses that employ that they have no choice but to switch model. They have no choice anymore. So this government, by bringing this in...
Just explain that model switch again. So switching model from having that high street salon to doing what?
Well, if you have 5 people working in 2 different salons, one pays £105,000 in tax, in VAT and employment costs, and the other one splits itself into 5 businesses, avoids paying VAT and the national insurance costs that are being brought in, and pays £45,000. The only choice is to go from this model, where you employ and train the next generation, to this model. And I'm not even blaming anyone for doing that, but the unlevel playing field, if you don't look at that and realise that the tax system in this country needs massive reform, then you just see the end of employment, and that's tragic.
I mean, Kerry, what are you thinking about the future of your traditional high street salon? Because it has an enormous impact on a community. Absolutely. If a hair salon closes down. You know, most people, this is probably a preserve of women, but some men like to go. Going to the hair salon, particularly if you're an older woman, might be the only chance you get to get out and about, to see people, to have conversations. You then might go and shop in the other retailers around. But I seem to be getting the impression that you're worried about the future of literally of high street salons. Am I overdoing it?
No, they're absolutely correct. The future of high street salons is really in jeopardy. And we are a community hub. We're there for the public, but we're also there for our team. We nurture and develop young people. We're bringing people through apprenticeship to become stylists in the future, and hopefully go on to be salon owners in high streets. So it's a very much a community thing that we need to have that lifeblood of young people coming through. And when we simply can't afford apprenticeship anymore, we're not going to be able to keep that going, you know, because most high street salons can't operate without an apprentice.
Quite a lot of people who are running salons just thinking this is too difficult, I'm going to go mobile and go to people's homes.
Absolutely, but that's the black economy, isn't it? And it's an encouragement, and they're being forced into that, which has no security, no employee rights. You know, people are not being protected as they should be, and as is the government's preference for the future.
And also customers might not be better served by not going to a salon for various different reasons. Toby, is this kind of like more of a town problem, sort of high street a salon like Kerry's running, or are we also seeing this in inner cities? Are we seeing this in towns like London where, let's be honest, you would pay more for your hair?
Look, it's a problem across the country, and like Kerry has said, you know, it's different for everybody. There are many people who run legitimate businesses in mobile. That's not again where we are. But for me, not having any employees means the workers' rights bill is completely meaningless.
Yes.
You know, I see a town. I know a city outside of London where a barber has been trying to get a job for 4 years, but he can't get an employed job because there aren't any. So he goes in as a self-employed contractor. He works a 12-hour day. He cleans, he washes up, he cleans the windows, he gets the coffee, and he cuts a few haircuts. He ends up with £3 an hour. That's where we're heading. That's where we're heading. And if you don't level the playing field, legitimate employing businesses don't have any other choice, and that's what frustrates me, and that's the place we're led. I mean, everything about this budget hits employees. There are businesses out there in the gig economy who only employ workers who are self-employed. Most of the delivery companies in this country, not one of them's been hit by this budget. No, that's a joke. Yes. It's a joke that billion-pound corporations haven't been hit by this, and yet middle businesses are wiped out.
SME. Kerry, final word to you. What's your message to the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves?
You have an absolute opportunity to save our industry, because if you leveled the playing field for tax and VAT, we would have more income in, and we could save apprentices and young people, and we would see growth rather than what the other option is, which is lack of growth. You know?
Right. Amazing point.
Toby, Kerry, give another little plug for your salon if anyone wants to check it out.
It's the Vanilla in Hornchurch.
All right, good stuff. I might pop down there myself. Yeah, quickly, Toby.
One thing, I just want to say a massive thank you to Kat Eccles and Neil Duncan-Jordan, who have gone out on a limb as Labour MPs, who have gone out on a limb to understand what we're doing. And I'm imploring the rest of the Labour Party to look and understand what is going on for our industry. Please.
Well, if Rachel Reeves helped, she'd not have any problem with her haircuts or hair dyes in future. That's one thing for sure. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
Stay put, because coming up, I'm going to be speaking to the former Police and Crime Commissioner for Cleveland, Steve Turner. He's going to join me in the studio and tell me why and how he was a victim of a witch hunt that nearly drove him to suicide. This is the Camilla Tominey Show, only on GB News.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest winter sun forecast. After the recent warmth across the Eastern Med, it is cooling down here, but still plenty of fine weather for parts of Turkey, Cyprus and the Greek islands. A little bit more unsettled for the rest of Greece and Italy, but especially so for Iberia. Some very heavy rain coming here during the first part of the week. But after some recent unsettled weather for the Canaries, it is warming up here. Plenty of fine weather to come with highs in Tenerife, 23 degrees.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
A very good morning to you. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, after a frosty start in the south today, most of us actually getting away with a fairly dry day, albeit the sunshine will be at much more premium than it was yesterday. Best of the sunshine first thing will be down towards the south, where we will get off to a frosty start. Elsewhere, plenty of cloud around, and that cloud will be thick enough in places, especially across northern England into the Midlands, Wales, to see a few spots of rain, but it should be mainly light in nature. Temperatures, again, similar to what we saw yesterday, highest reaching in the south 10 to 12 Celsius. Into the evening, and we'll hang on to some sunshine as the sun sets across the very far south of England. Elsewhere, more in the way of cloud around, and again, that cloud will be thick enough just to produce the odd spot of rain. Maybe some late sunshine also for Northern Ireland and Northern England, where Scotland, again, a fair bit of cloud around with maybe some spots of rain being brought in on a fairly keen northerly wind. Into the evening and overnight period, very little changes. Plenty of cloud around, clearest of the skies out towards western Scotland, maybe down towards the southwestern corner of England. So here we could just see a frost overnight, but elsewhere with the cloud cover in place, I think it will be a little bit less cold than it has been of late. Most towns and cities staying firmly above freezing. So we start off Monday on a fairly grey note. Again, there could be some spots of rain around, but I'm hopeful as the day goes on, we should start to see that cloud break up a bit. Maybe the best of sunshine across parts of Scotland, and then later on in the afternoon, parts of East Anglia and southeastern England cheering up. Temperatures on Monday, thanks to the cloud cover for most of us, probably a little bit lower than over the weekend, but still reaching double figures where we do see the sunshine appear.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. You're going to want to stay tuned for this story because it is really quite incredible what can happen when false allegations are tabled, they aren't challenged, and they literally cost someone their career. That person is former Police and Crime Commissioner for Cleveland, Steve Turner, who joins me in the studio. Let's just set this out for the audience very clearly. You're elected as Cleveland's Police and Crime Commissioner in May 2021.
Yep.
You then find yourself accused, without any evidence at all, of 3 separate offences: theft, sexual assault and a pub fight That's all within 8 weeks of you being appointed and all anonymously.
Yeah.
None of the allegations result in any charges or legal action at all, and yet your career ends up being destroyed. One of the people that gives these allegations rocket fuel is the Labour MP Andy MacDonald, who uses parliamentary privilege to put these allegations against you in the House of Commons. That means he can't be sued for defamation because he's got that parliamentary privilege. We then have you saying you're the victim of a witch hunt. You at one point are pushed to suicide by all this. And in the end, it results in you losing your job as the Police and Crime Commissioner, only to be replaced by one of Andy MacDonald's closest allies, Matthew Storey. So just explain in your words the effect that this has had on you.
This was appalling. So it's taken me 3.5 years to finally be able to have the actual physical evidence that Andy MacDonald was behind these allegations. Because for all I've suspected it up until this point, for all he's been the instigator-in-chief, he's been the person in the media, he's brought other Labour MPs into this. I mean, at one point, Sir Keir Starmer was calling for me to step down. Rachel Reeves said I should resign. Bridget Phillipson said I should step aside. All of these people, it's been coordinated. And I don't think any of those people know Andy MacDonald was actually at the heart of these allegations, because he got anonymity from Cleveland Police's Chief Constable, Richard Lewis, when some of these allegations went in.
Right.
So yes, the one he stood up in parliamentary privilege, everybody knows was him. The other two, he sent private emails to the Chief Constable ensuring that he could never be shown as the person that put those allegations in.
But what's this all about, Steve? What's motivated it?
That's the first question everybody asks me, and the honest answer is I don't know. I don't know what his motive is, other than the guy that had the role before me was a very good friend of Andy MacDonald's. The guy that's now got the role after me was Andy MacDonald's office manager at the time all this was going on, and he was the person that was facilitating his communication.
Yeah, so this is this Matthew Storey.
Matthew Storey. And Andy MacDonald, as a 20-year Labour MP, former member of Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet, right, he despises anybody that isn't a Labour politician.
Yes.
And that's all I can think of. It is pure political hatred.
Just explain to the audience, Steve, what are your politics?
I was a Conservative at the time this was going on. I was elected as a Conservative PCC. I'm no longer a member of the Conservative Party for a whole host of reasons. They didn't really... Throughout all of this, I've had very little support from anybody. Everybody, it's so fanciful, it's so far-fetched, and the way MacDonald's done this, it's really hard for people to believe anybody can put an allegation in, a serious sexual allegation, without evidence.
OK, so let's just go through it for total clarity. You've been accused of theft. Have you ever stolen anything?
I was accused of systematic theft in parliamentary privilege. I've got a police caution from almost 30 years ago for handling stolen goods.
Right.
That was spent, Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. No reason to ever bring it up. Even my family didn't know I had that caution until...
Sexual assault?
Never.
That was investigated?
It was investigated independently by Avon and Somerset Police, and their discontinuance said that they could never identify a victim.
So completely made up, seemingly?
There's no witness statement, there's nothing.
Pub fight?
I supposedly punched a pensioner in a pub in the town where I live. Again, it was all hearsay. And what makes that worse is the allegation was that pensioner is now deceased. He died of cancer the year after I supposedly hit him. So again, that couldn't be investigated. None of these were about the allegations ever actually getting any traction. It was all about the allegations being put in the media. The media knew about some of these allegations before I knew about some of these allegations.
But was the media just swallowing it all? I mean, you've got to check out whether allegations are true, or are we now entering this kind of universe where anyone can say anything they like anonymously?
It's not anybody. This is an MP.
Yeah, so that's the specifics
As an
of
MP, as a journalist, if an MP comes to you and is prepared to say, I am telling you this, it's beyond belief that somebody that's elected to our parliament, that to uphold our laws, to make our laws, could ever do this to another human being and face no repercussions. As it stands, the Labour Party won't even investigate this man.
No. And what's the effect been on your life, Steve?
It was horrific. So I've had death threats, I've had malicious phone calls, the trauma on my family has been unbelievable. And I think what was worse was even after I'd been cleared of all these allegations, it's still there in the social media. I was getting shouted at in the street. People abusing me online. Anybody that didn't follow my politics I was fair game at that point. And it got too much when we couldn't get answers and everybody was covering up. And people have covered this up.
Yeah.
Right? When I couldn't get answers, I thought the only way I could get some answers was to take my own life, and then there'd have to be some type of investigation and the truth would come out, because I was so desperate for the truth. And I attempted to take my own life. It's only because my wife found me on the floor in the kitchen and an ambulance turned up within minutes that I'm still here today to tell this story.
What do you want to happen to Andy McDonald?
I want a full investigation by the Labour Party. They've gone on record as saying they're improving standards, and I want a full investigation by parliamentary standards, because this man has broken all of their rules and all of their standards.
All right, thank you, Steve, for talking us through all of that so clearly. I need to now read out some right of replies because, of course, we do tell stories and we've got to give both sides of the story. So we did approach Andy McDonald, MP, and Matthew Storey. Both declined to comment. The Labour Party said, "We received a complaint from Mr Turner. No evidence was provided to substantiate his claims or demonstrate any potential contravention of the Labour Party's rules. We have informed Mr Turner of the outcome of our assessment of his complaint." The Independent Office for Police Conduct said, "In November 2021, we received a mandatory conduct referral for the Cleveland Police and Crime Panel relating to an allegation of serious non-recent sexual offence made through a third party. After following up all available lines of inquiry, we wrote to the panel in May 2022 to inform them that our investigation had been discontinued. If anyone has been affected by similar themes in this discussion, then please do call the Samaritans on their 24-hour helpline on 123. Thank you very much to Steve Turner for your story. Thank you to all of my guests today. I'm going to be back at the same time next week, 9:30 as usual. But up next, it's my paper reviewer extraordinaire, GB News' Michael Portillo with his 11 o'clock show. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday and have a great week.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed boiler repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, here's your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. We've got plenty of fine weather in store across the UK today. Quite a bit of cloud around though, and temperatures still disappointing for the time of year. High pressure is generally in charge of the UK at the moment, giving us fairly quiet conditions. But we've got this weak weather front pushing down from the north. That's bringing a band of cloud and some patchy rain to central parts of the UK as we head into the afternoon. So parts of northern England, North Wales and the North Midlands could see some patchy rain on and off through the course of the afternoon. The best of the sunshine generally for southernmost counties of England. Some sunshine too towards the northwest behind that weather front, but also one or two showers here as we go through the day. Temperatures still pretty disappointing for the time of year, peaking at 10 or 11 Celsius. 11 in London, for example, is 52 in Fahrenheit. As we go through to the end of the afternoon then, we hold on to quite a bit of sunshine across the north and west of Scotland. Fairly clear skies here to end the day. More in the way of cloud though towards the south and east of the country, and temperatures here still a little bit suppressed. Quite a bit of cloud across Northern Ireland into northern parts of England, and the cloud thicker as we come into the North Midlands, parts of North Wales giving some patchy rain at times. The cloud slowly extending its way southwards as we go into the evening. So the best of the late sunshine generally across the far south of England. During the course of the overnight period, cloud then extends its way south and westwards across England and Wales, bringing bits and pieces of patchy rain in places. Towards the north and northwest, though, there'll be some clear spells at times, particularly towards the north and west of Scotland. And here we'll see the lowest temperatures, quite a widespread frost here by the morning on Monday. Could see temperatures in real spots down to -5 Celsius, whereas across England and Wales, the frost will tend to be more patchy, given the fact there'll be quite a bit of cloud around. So as we start the new working week then, quite a lot of cloud to start the day. The best of the sunshine up towards the north and west of Scotland. But notice as we go through into the afternoon, more in the way of sunshine developing across the east and southeast of England as dry air starts to move in from the southeast. Always cloudier out towards the west and northwest of the UK at this stage. And temperatures still disappointing for the time of year, peaking at around 10 Celsius 50 in Fahrenheit.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
we're giving you the chance to splash out this season with an incredible £17,777 in tax-free cash. Jet off on your dream holiday, treat yourself to something special, or just save it for a rainy day. You'll also receive 2 brand new designer watches and a Mulberry handbag, so you can really look the part this spring. For another chance to win the lot, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost